Hey there, friends. Tonight, I have a chilling story to share with you. One that will make your heart race and your imagination run wild. It's about my haunting ride on the last train home. So, get comfy, turn off the lights, and prepare yourself for some spine-tingling moments. And before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I have something special just for you. Click the link in the description below to learn more. Now, let's get started. I was waiting at the dark, empty train station one rainy night. The sound of raindrops hit the ground like tiny drums. Everything around me was quiet, too quiet except for the rain. I looked at my watch. The last train should arrive soon, but the platform felt spooky in the dim light. I could see shadows dancing in the corners of my eyes, but when I turned my head, nothing was there. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the cold feeling creeping up my spine. The only sound that broke the silence was the distant rumble of thunder. Suddenly, I heard the train coming. I could hear its loud whistle echoing through the night, and I felt a mix of relief and fear. When the train stopped in front of me, it looked old and rusty like it belonged to another time. The doors opened with a loud creak and I stepped inside. To my surprise, the train was almost empty. Just a few passengers sat quietly, staring out the windows or down at their feet. I found a seat by the window and tried to ignore the strange feeling in my stomach. As the train started moving, I looked outside. The rain poured down harder, blurring the view. Everything looked like a water painting and I couldn't make out where we were going. The lights inside the train flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadowy figure standing at the end of the aisle. I blinked and it disappeared. Maybe I was just seeing things. I pulled my jacket closer, feeling the chill in the air. The train rocked back and forth as it sped along the tracks. I tried to distract myself by listening to music on my phone, but my fingers were shaking too much to press play. Instead, I looked around at the other passengers. They all seemed different, like they weren't quite real. Then I noticed a girl sitting across from me. She looked maybe a little older than me with wide eyes and messy hair. She stared right at me. I felt like I should say something, but my voice got stuck in my throat. After a long, awkward moment, she whispered, "Do you feel it?" "Feel what?" I asked, confused. She leaned closer and her face was serious. "The darkness. It's thick around here." I wanted to laugh, but I felt a shiver instead. I looked out the window again, but all I could see were the blurry raindrops. Suddenly, the train jolted, shaking everyone in their seats. The lights went out completely, and I felt a wave of fear rush over me. I could hear people gasping, and my heart began to race. I could feel the darkness closing in like a thick blanket. I tried to remain calm, but it was hard. Just then, the girl grabbed my arm. "You have to hold on tight," she said, her eyes wide with fear. "They come when it's dark." I was about to ask her who they were when the lights flickered back on. But things had changed. The train was no longer the same. The other passengers were gone and the seats were empty. Only the girl and I remained. I could feel something creep up my back like icy fingers touching my skin. The girl pointed towards the front of the train. "We should go," she whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded and we slowly got up. The aisle felt longer than it had moments before and the air was heavy. As we walked forward, I could hear strange noises coming from the engine room, whispers and low growls. It felt like the train itself was alive, threatening to swallow us whole. When we reached the front of the train, we found a door that seemed to lead to the engine room. The girl pushed it open and a rush of cold air hit us. I could see the shadowy outline of the conductor sitting in his chair. He didn't turn around and something about him felt wrong. "Are we going to be okay?" I asked the girl, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," she replied, her face pale. But just then the conductor turned his head slowly and I gasped. His eyes were hollow, as if something was missing inside. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "The last train home always has a few surprises," he said, his voice echoing in the room. "You can never leave unscathed." I felt my heart race faster as the shadows around us began to twist and curl like smoke. Suddenly, the train lurched violently to the side and we were thrown against the wall. I looked at the girl. "What do we do?" "We can't stay here," she shouted, pulling me away from the conductor. We stumbled back into the aisle, the weight of the darkness pressing down on us. I could hear the whispers growing louder, surrounding us like a haunting melody. "Run!" she yelled, and we sprinted down the empty train, trying to escape the growing shadows. The whispers turned angry and I could feel something chasing us. I turned back for a moment and saw a dark shape slithering behind us, its eyes glowing. I didn't know where to go. The train felt endless, stretching out like a dream with no end. I could hear the creaking of the metal and the steady rhythm of the rain outside. Every time I looked back, the shadow was closer, its growls filling the air with fear. We finally reached the last car and I opened the door to the outside, but it was not what I expected. Instead of the safe platform, there was only darkness. The girl stopped, tears in her eyes. "This is it, isn't it?" "No," I shouted. "We have to find a way." But I could feel the pull of the darkness and I didn't know if we could escape. Just then the growling stopped and I heard a voice whispering my name. "Help us," it said, echoing in the empty space. I shook my head, wanting to run, but my feet felt stuck. The darkness danced around us and I could see moments from my life flash in front of me. Happy memories, sad ones, all tangled with the shadows. "Don't listen to it," the girl yelled, shaking my shoulders. "It's trying to draw us in." I closed my eyes, blocking out the voices. The only thing I could hear was the pounding of my heart. Suddenly, I felt a warm hand holding mine. I opened my eyes and saw the girl's determined face. "We can fight it together." With a nod, we pushed forward, fighting against the darkness. I could feel its icy fingers clawing at my mind, but I held on tight to her hand. "Don't let go," I screamed as we ran back toward the front of the train. The shadows pulled and tugged at us, but we kept moving. I didn't care how scared I was. I needed to help us both escape this nightmare. We charged past the conductor, who was now staring blankly at us, like a broken doll. As we reached the door to the engine room, I turned back one last time. The shadows were swirling, angry and desperate. I took a deep breath and pushed through the door, dragging the girl with me. What happened next was a blur of wind and darkness as the train rumbled violently. I could see flashes of light, almost as if we were speeding through a tunnel of stars. Then, in an instant, we were outside. The rain poured down around us and we found ourselves back at the train station. Everything looked normal, but I knew it wasn't. I looked at the girl and she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I guess we made it," she said, but her voice trembled. I turned to thank her, but she was already fading away like a ghost in the night. "Wait," I called, but she was gone. The station was empty again and I felt a sense of loss wash over me. Why had she disappeared? I looked down the tracks, wondering if the train would come back. As I stood there in the rain, I realized that even though I was safe, the darkness was still out there, waiting. The echoes of the train ride lingered in my ears, a haunting melody I couldn't shake. I turned to leave, but just before I did, I heard the faint sound of the train whistle in the distance. I took a step back, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to run, but a small voice inside me whispered to stay. What if it's not over? I thought. I shivered, feeling the cold wind whip around me. The train had brought me home, but it had also taken something away. I looked up at the sky, the rain still falling, and I knew that sometimes the last train home isn't the end of the journey. As I walked away from the station, the chilling realization washed over me. The darkness never truly leaves. It lingers, waiting for the chance to return. And now I find myself here sharing my story with you. Even as I tell it, I can't help but wonder who else is listening, who else will feel the pull of the last train home when the rain begins to fall. So, remember, friends, when you hear that whistle in the night, you might want to think twice before stepping on board. The ride might not be what you expect, and you may never know what, or who, you'll encounter along the way. Thank you for listening to my story and stay safe out there. Click the link in the description below to learn more about my special surprise for you. As I walked away from the station, I glanced back one last time, half expecting the train to reappear. The air was thick with tension, the rain splattering against the ground like tiny footsteps. It felt as if the shadows were expanding, reaching out for me, trying to pull me back into their grasp. I shook my head and hurried away, the streetlight flickering above me as I made my way down the empty road. The world outside was quiet, almost too quiet. Only the sound of my footsteps echoed against the pavement. I wished I could forget what I had seen. I wanted to shake off the feeling of dread hanging over me like a dark cloud. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more it kept creeping back in. Just as I turned the corner, I heard a low whisper coming from the shadows. It sent a cold shiver down my spine. "Help us," the voice echoed, soft yet haunting. My heart raced faster when I recognized it was the same voice from the train. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. I stepped back, looking around nervously. The street was empty, but I could sense something lurking just beyond my sight. "Is someone there?" I called out, my voice shaking. Nothing answered except the relentless sound of falling rain. I started walking faster, almost running, trying to escape the sense of being watched. As I made my way farther down the street, I noticed something strange in the distance. It was an old, abandoned house. The windows were broken, and vines crawled up its sides like skeletal fingers. It seemed to call to me as if it had its own story to tell. I stopped, staring at it. A part of me wanted to turn away, but another part was curious. It felt wrong to be drawn to it, yet I couldn't resist. I walked closer, my heart pounding in my chest. The door hung off its hinges, and the wind creaked it slowly back and forth, like it was inviting me in. I hesitated, memories of what had happened on the train flooding my mind. But something pushed me forward. Maybe it was the hope of finding answers, or maybe it was something darker. Inside, the air was damp and musty. I could smell the decay, the remnants of a long-forgotten time. Shadows danced around me, making it hard to focus. I stepped carefully, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I felt as if I was not alone, that eyes were watching me from the corners of the darkened room. As I moved through the house, I stumbled upon an old photograph lying on the floor. Picking it up, I gasped. It was a picture of the girl from the train, her eyes wide and filled with fear. On the back, it read, "Find me before it's too late." My heart sank. Was she trapped here like I felt I was? I turned to put the photo down, but a sudden noise caught my attention. A soft giggle echoing from somewhere deep within the house. I froze again, fear washing over me. It sounded like a child's laugh, innocent yet filled with a deep sense of foreboding. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. "Is someone there?" My only answer was the eerie silence that followed, making the giggle seem even more unsettling. I felt a chill run down my spine as I followed the sound, my feet moving of their own accord. The hallway stretched endlessly before me, dark doors on either side. I reached for one door, but something stopped me. A heavy feeling settled over me, pulling me back. It felt like a warning. I could almost hear the whispers from the train, urging me to turn back, telling me some stories are not meant to be uncovered. Ignoring the voice, I pressed on and opened the nearest door. Inside, the room was filled with shadows and dust. Toys lay scattered across the floor, remnants of a child's innocent play. But the atmosphere was heavy, filled with a sense of grief. In the corner, I saw a small figure hunched over. "Hey," I called out, stepping cautiously toward it. As I got closer, my breath froze in my chest. It was the girl from the photograph, but she was not alone. Around her were dark shapes, swirling and shifting as if they were alive. She looked up at me with pleading eyes, but the shadows moved closer, curling around her like tendrils. "Help me," she screamed, her voice breaking. I felt my heart race as I realized that the shadows were not just anything. They were the very darkness that had haunted the train. Panic surged through me as I turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind me. I was trapped. The girl's eyes widened in fear. "You have to be careful," she cried. "They will take you just like they took me." I felt the cold press of fingers wrapping around my ankles. I kicked and thrashed, but the shadows only tightened their grip. "You have to fight them," she shouted. I didn't know how. I remembered the warmth of her hand from the train and the strength we had found together. "Try to find that strength," I whispered. "I won't leave you." Just then, the shadows surged around us, their whispers filling the air, trying to drag us into the dark depths of despair. "Give in," they hissed, their voices a chorus of maddened cries. "You cannot escape." In that moment, I remembered the girl's smile, the light in her eyes. A surge of hope flooded through me. I couldn't let fear win. I took a deep breath and focused on her, imagining us escaping together, leaving this horrifying place behind. "Together," I whispered fiercely. With all my strength, I yanked my foot free from the shadows and reached for her hand. "Grab on," I urged, and as our fingers touched, a strange warmth spread through my body, illuminating the darkness. Suddenly, the shadows shrieked, retreating from the light we created. The door behind me crashed open, and I could see the outside world beckoning. "We have to go," I urged, pulling her with me as the darkness hissed and writhed like a wounded beast behind us. The closer we got to freedom, the stronger our bond felt, pushing the shadows back further and further. Just as we stepped over the threshold and into the cool night air, the darkness surged. One last time, reaching for us with desperate, clawing fingers. But we moved as one, running away from the suffocating despair. I turned back, heart pounding, and saw the shadows dissipating, swallowed by the light of the moon shining down upon us. Breathless, we stumbled onto the empty street, the old house receding into the dark behind us. I looked at the girl, her expression a mix of fear and joy. "We did it," I gasped, but her smile faltered as she looked away. "I'm not free yet," she said softly. "They will always follow." Confused, I searched her face. "What do you mean?" "The darkness is patient," she whispered, her eyes glistening with sadness. "It will wait until you least expect it. You might think you escaped, but it never forgets." I wanted to argue to say this was over, but deep down I felt the truth in her words. The experience on the train, the house, the shadows, it all hung over me like a dark cloud. "You have to be careful," she said again, her voice urgent. "They will come back. And when they do, you must be ready." I nodded slowly. The rain started to fall again, gentle at first, but then it turned into a downpour. I stood there, feeling the weight of her words sinking in. I had escaped for now, but I could still hear the whispers fluttering around me, deep within the corners of my mind. "Will I see you again?" I asked, my heart aching at the thought of losing her. "I hope not," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But know this, the last train home has many stops, and wherever you go, the darkness will always be waiting." With those words, she stepped back into the shadows, slowly fading away, and I stood there in the rain, feeling more lost than ever. I stood alone in the pouring rain, feeling an uneasy chill creep down my spine. The girl's words echoed in my mind, haunting and ominous. No matter how far I thought I had run from the darkness, it felt like it was lurking just outside of my sight, waiting patiently. Her warning didn't just echo, it mingled with the sound of the raindrops hitting the pavement, creating a dark melody that sent shivers through me. As I began to walk again, I felt the weight of every step pressing down on me. The rain was relentless, washing away the warmth, leaving me feeling exposed and vulnerable. I glanced around, hoping to find some sign of life, something familiar to remind me that the world was still normal. But the streets were empty, the lights flickering as if they had their own hidden fears. I turned down another road, feeling like I was being pulled deeper into an unseen abyss. The air grew heavier, almost thick like fog, and I could hear whispers again, soft and insistent, floating on the wind. I strained to listen but couldn't quite make out the words. It felt like they were beckoning me closer, drawing me towards an unknown destination. An alleyway caught my eye, dark and foreboding, the shadows seeming to stretch out like gnarled fingers. My heart raced, but something inside urged me on. I stepped closer, curiosity battling against dread. The alley felt alive, pulsing with an energy that made my skin prickle. I ventured further in, the sounds of the rain dimming behind me. The light from the street seemed to fade, swallowed by the oppressive darkness. I reached for my phone, the weak flashlight flickering to life, casting eerie shapes on the brick walls. Each step echoed like a heartbeat, and the whispers became clearer. They felt like a chorus of lost souls trying to pull me into their world. I came upon a small door at the end of the alley, half hidden beneath a thick layer of grime. It was slightly ajar, creaking softly as if inviting me in. I hesitated, knowing I should turn back, but the whispers turned into desperate pleas. "Please help us." My heart thudded in my chest as I pushed the door open. Inside was a dimly lit room, filled with rusted old equipment and broken furniture. It smelled musty, the air thick with dust motes swirling around. The walls were painted in faded, peeling colors, and I felt like I had stepped into a forgotten dream. In the center of the room I saw a mirror. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, but I could see something strange moving within it. My heart raced. Was that a reflection of me? Yet there was an odd glimmering shadow behind me, shifting and writhing. I stepped closer, entranced. As I wiped the dust away, the air grew colder, and the shadows in the mirror began to morph into distorted faces, their mouths opening in silent screams. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, and the room plunged into darkness. Panic surged through me as I reached for the light on my phone, but the screen flickered, fading in and out like my racing heartbeat. The whispers turned frantic, swirling around me, echoing off the walls. "You shouldn't have come here." I felt a breath on my neck, icy and terrifying. My mind raced, instinctively wanting to turn and run, but I couldn't move. The shadows from the mirror seemed to reach out, tendrils of darkness curling around my ankle. I looked down, horrified, as they threatened to pull me beneath the floor, into a space between reality and nightmares. A voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding, "Release him." The shadows recoiled for a moment, and I seized my chance. Summoning whatever strength I had left, I turned and bolted back towards the door. But the darkness clawed at me, and I stumbled, falling against the cold wooden floor. As I crawled, I could still feel the voices tugging at my mind, stirring memories I thought were long buried. I remembered moments of fear, the shadows of my past colliding with my present. I could see glimpses of faces I had lost, their eyes pleading for escape. With a burst of will, I pulled myself up, slamming the door behind me just as I heard the sounds of something crashing against it. The shadows writhed and screamed, their anger pouring out like a storm. I ran out of the alley, the night air hitting me hard, but I didn't stop. I dashed down the street, adrenaline pushing me forward, my heart racing like a wild drum. But as I glanced back, I felt them in pursuit. The air behind me felt charged, the whispers returning, colder and sharper. They taunted me now, a cacophony of voices swirling in my head. You can't escape. I took a sharp turn down a side street, desperate for a way to lose whatever had been unleashed. Each corner felt like it was closing in, the city now acting like a maze. The thrill of fear enveloped me, but I couldn't let it consume me. I had to stay alert, aware. I remembered the girl's face again, her warning echoing more deeply than ever. I stopped, breathless, my back against a cold brick wall. I tried to slow my racing heart, gathering my thoughts. I had made it this far. I couldn't let the darkness win. Yet, as I stood there, the shadows danced in the corner of my vision, creeping closer. I could hear the laughter again, that chilling sound weaving through the air, mocking my fear. Then, suddenly, the ground beneath me began to shake. It felt alive, pulsating with an energy that felt wrong, like something was struggling to break free from beneath the surface. A loud crack echoed nearby, and I looked up in horror as the asphalt started to split open, dark tendrils creeping out like the roots of some ancient, twisted tree. Panicking, I turned and sprinted again. I stumbled through familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign, my instincts kicking in, urging me to find safety. But the darkness was relentless, chasing me, filling the air with despair. Without knowing why, I headed towards the train station again. Maybe I was hoping to find some answers, or perhaps to face the shadows once and for all. The sound of my footsteps echoed like a heartbeat in the empty space. I reached the station's entrance, the doors seeming to have a life of their own as they swung open. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with dread. The lights flickered as if they were a warning, hinting that something waited within. A deep chill wrapped around me as I stepped inside, my heart pounding louder than ever. In the center of the hall, I spotted a figure standing still, facing the tracks. I squinted, trying to make out their features, but the shadows wrapped around them like a cloak. You shouldn't have come back, a familiar voice echoed, and my blood turned to ice as I recognized the girl again. Her eyes were wide, filled with both fear and a knowing sadness. It won't forget, and now it knows you're here. What do I do? How do I escape? I gasped, my voice trembling. You have to face it, she urged, taking a step forward as shadows swirled around her. You cannot outrun the darkness, you must confront it. Only then can you truly be free. Suddenly, I heard the low rumble of a train approaching, its lights slicing through the darkness like a knife. Do I get on, or do I face whatever thing was chasing me? The choice felt impossible, yet the girl's eyes urged me to choose. I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the fear. I didn't want to be weighed down by the past anymore. I could feel the shadows pulse and swirl around my legs, creeping closer to my heart. But there was a flicker of determination inside of me, a small spark that pushed me to take a stand. Let's fight it together, I shouted, my voice cutting through the fear. I felt a rush of energy, a connection to the girl, as if we were bound by something deeper. As the train rolled to a stop, I felt the power of that bond surrounding us, the weight of the darkness slipping slightly. Now, armed with the knowledge I needed to face my fears, I stepped onto the train. But I felt the darkness pull back, howling in rage, and I knew this was just the beginning of a much deeper struggle. I looked back at the girl, standing bravely amidst the shadows, her face a mixture of hope and determination. This time, it was my choice to step forward, and I knew I wouldn't let her down. The doors shut behind me, sealing off the creeping shadows of the night, and I took my first deep breath of relief. But I knew, that the real fight had just begun. As the train doors shut behind me, a heavy silence filled the compartment. The lights flickered painfully, casting strange shadows that danced along the walls, and I could hear the distant rumble of the train as it started to move. My heart raced, each beat echoing loudly in the stillness, and the chilling thoughts swirled around in my mind. What had I just done by coming here? I took a seat by the window, my hands pressed against the cool glass. Rain drummed on the surface, creating a soothing pattern, but the comfort was short-lived. The rhythmic tapping was soon drowned out by an unsettling sound, a low, growling whisper that seemed to seep from the very walls of the train. Come back to us, it coaxed, the words curling around my mind like smoke. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the noise, but it wrapped around me tighter. I felt like I was not alone. I opened my eyes, scanning the empty seats. Everything looked normal, but there was a suffocating air of dread hanging over me, like the train itself was aware of the darkness that followed me. The train sped through the night, and the landscape outside blurred into shadows. I took a deep breath, hoping the girl's presence might comfort me, but all I could sense was the weight of the haunting silence. Then suddenly the lights flickered again, dimming to almost total darkness. As fear shot through me, the whispers turned into laughter, high-pitched and crazed. I looked around, panic rising in my throat. "Where are you?" I shouted into the void. "Show yourself." But my voice only echoed back at me, swallowed by the shadows. And then, as if summoned by my challenge, the lights flickered back to life, revealing a figure sitting across from me. I gasped as I recognized the girl from the train, a ghostly outline, her face pale against the flickering light. "You shouldn't have come," she said, her voice wavering like a candle's flame. "Why not? I can't run forever," I replied, feeling frustrated and scared. "You have to understand," she warned, her eyes wide with a fear that mirrored my own. "You've awakened something that wants to drag you back." Before I could respond, the train jolted violently, throwing me against the window. The lights flickered wildly, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted along the walls. I could feel the temperature drop, the air turning cold and damp. I looked up in panic as I realized I couldn't see outside anymore. The world had disappeared, consumed by a thick, gray fog. "Get ready," the girl warned, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is here." I could sense it before I saw it, a presence creeping along the floor like a predator stalking its prey. The shadows stretched, pulling closer, and with each passing second, I felt the claustrophobic weight of the darkness closing in around me. Then, from the corner of my eye, I caught movement, dark shapes morphing away from the walls. I turned to face them, heart racing. They were the same figures I'd seen before, distorted and twisted, their features barely recognizable. They reached for me, claw-like hands outstretched. "Run!" I screamed, leaping to my feet. I stumbled down the aisle, my heart pounding in my chest. The laughter grew louder, echoing in my ears, taunting me. "You can't escape." The girl was still there, following closely as I dashed past rows of empty seats. I felt the shadows brush against my skin, a cold touch that sent shivers down my spine. They were trying to pull me back into the darkness, reminding me of every fear I had ever faced. As I reached the end of the train car, I found a door that led to the next compartment. I flung it open, not looking back. My head spun with panic as I dashed into the next room, only to find it filled with flickering candlelight. It was almost beautiful, but the atmosphere was thick with tension, as though a storm lingered just outside. The flickering flames cast eerie shadows, and my gaze fell on a long table laid out with old photographs, dusty and yellowed with age. I didn't want to look, but some instinct urged me forward. I hesitated before picking one up. My heart sank as I recognized the faces. They were people I knew, long gone from my life, their eyes filled with sadness and regret. Each photograph felt like a ghost, reminding me of loss and pain. I dropped it, shaking my head to clear my thoughts, but the images clung to my mind. "Why are you showing me this?" I cried out, feeling the weight of sorrow crash down on me. "What do you want?" From behind me, I heard the girl's voice echo faintly. "They were all tied to the darkness, just like you." Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, slamming the door shut behind me, trapping me in the candlelit room. I turned, panic rising in my chest. In an instant, the candles flickered violently, and a whirlwind of shadows twisted around the edges of the room. A thick fog crept along the floor, wrapping around my ankles, pulling me toward the center of the room. I could feel its tendrils snaking around me, trying to drag me down into the darkness. "Get away. Let me go," I shouted, struggling against the grip. In desperation, I reached out to the girl. "Help me," I called, but the shadows were drowning out my cries, their laughter growing louder, mocking my fear. And then I saw it, a towering figure rising from the shadows, a grotesque silhouette wreathed in darkness. It had no distinct features, just a formless mass that seemed to breathe and pulse. "You're mine," it whispered in a voice that echoed like thunder, reverberating deep within my bones. I felt terror seep into my veins, and I stumbled back against the wall. The laughter mixed with the whispers, spinning around me, creating a terrifying chorus of familiar voices. "Face your fears," they urged, their tones filled with a dreadful clarity. With every ounce of my strength, I forced myself to breathe, to think. This creature, this thing, was feeding on my fear, and I realized that the only way to escape was to confront it head-on. "No!" I shouted defiantly, pushing back against its overwhelming presence. "You have no power over me." As the words left my lips, a surge of warmth spread through me, like a fire igniting in the depths of my soul. I focused on the girl's encouraging presence, willing the light inside me to grow. "I am not afraid," I declared, more for myself than for the thing before me. Slowly, the shadows recoiled as if stung by my confidence. The figure trembled, its form wavering in response. You cannot resist, it roared, the ground shaking beneath my feet. But I stood firm. My heart raced, but now it was with courage rather than fear. The shadows coiling around me began to dissolve, revealing the girl standing tall beside me, her courage reflected in my newfound strength. "Together," she whispered, her presence radiating warmth. "Yes," I shouted, gripping her hand tightly. We faced the darkness together, two souls entwined, determined to push back against the encroaching night. The immense weight that had pressed down on us began to lift. The shadows screamed, their chilling wails slicing through the room as the figure writhed, a vortex of rage and denial. "You cannot escape your fate," it shrieked, reaching out for us with claw-like hands that seemed to stretch into infinity. But I felt the constructive force of hope surge through us. As if fueled by that force, the candlelight grew brighter, illuminating the corners of the room, driving back the shadows that threatened to swallow us whole. "You have no hold over our past," I shouted, gripping the girl's hand tighter, feeling our combined strength push against the darkness. The figure shuddered, its shape flickering like a dying flame. I could see its twisted face for just a moment, and in those eyes, I saw reflections of my own fears, loss, despair, and sorrow. I understood then that these shadows were not just creatures of the night. They were manifestations of everything that haunted me. With a sudden rush of clarity, I took a step forward. I will not be chained by my past. I am stronger than you. The train shook violently, and suddenly the ground beneath us split open, revealing a light that forced the darkness to recede. I felt the energy shift as the ground trembled, urging us toward the light. The walls of the train car began to crumble away, and the shadows shrieked, twisting into incoherent forms as they were pulled back, howling in defeat. In that moment, I could taste freedom, the promise of liberation just within reach. "Let's go." I gripped the girl's hand tightly, and together we ran toward the radiant glow, leaving the shadows screaming behind. As we bolted toward the light, a crack echoed through the train, and I could feel it shifting, the darkness losing its grip. We were almost there. I could see the exit ahead, a bright portal shimmering like a gateway to hope. And then, with one final leap, we burst through, escaping into the blinding brilliance. The shadows shrieked one last time, their anguished cries fading into nothingness. We landed on the cool earth outside the train, breathless and free. The night sky was vast, filled with stars twinkling above us like distant promises. I looked at the girl, her face reflecting the same relief and joy I felt. "We did it," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. But just as I felt the warmth of victory, a hush fell over the world around us. The air grew heavy again, and I sensed a familiar presence returning, lurking just out of sight. "You can't escape forever," a voice whispered from the shadows, chilling me to the bone. The darkness was still there, patient and watchful. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that though we had triumphed today, the fight was far from over. As I stood beside the girl, resolved to face whatever lay ahead, I knew that together we could uncover the light within the shadows, even as they continued to whisper my name. As we stood there in the cool night air, the thrill of our escape was short-lived. The shadows were not gone. They lingered at the edge of my vision, an unsettling force that felt all too familiar. I could sense them waiting, like wolves in the dark, poised to strike at the slightest hint of weakness. My heart pounded heavily, and I turned to the girl next to me. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked around, her expression serious. "We can't let them know we're scared. We have to keep moving." Taking a deep breath, I nodded, steeling my resolve. We began walking, and with each step, I could hear the soft rustling of leaves, as if the trees themselves were whispering secrets. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness, but the stars overhead twinkled like scattered shards of glass, illuminating our way. But the calm atmosphere was deceptive. As we ventured deeper into the woods, an unnatural silence enveloped us, swallowing any sounds of nature. It felt heavy, weighing down on my shoulders, and I could feel a chill creeping up my spine. "Stay close," I said, trying to reassure myself as much as her. Yet the words came out shaky, betraying my fear. Just then, I caught a glimpse of movement in the shadows, a flicker of darkness darting between the trees, lurking just out of view. My breath hitched as I glanced at the girl, who seemed to notice it too. "Did you see that?" I breathed, panic creeping into my chest. She nodded, her eyes wide. "We need to keep going." We quickened our pace, the crunch of leaves beneath our feet echoing in the heavy silence. Then, as if the woods were alive, I heard a faint voice. It sounded distant yet close enough to chill my blood. "Come back," it sighed, drifting through the trees like a haunting melody. I shivered, glancing around. What is that? I asked, my voice shaking. Just keep walking, she urged, her grip tightening around my arm. The deeper we went, the more surreal everything felt. Twisted branches reached out like gnarled fingers, and shadows stretched unnaturally from the trees, warping the world around us. I tried to block out the whispers, but they grew louder, layering over each other, forming an unsettling cacophony. Why did you leave? A voice whispered in my ear, cold as ice. My skin prickled and I turned quickly, but there was no one there. Just the looming trees, their branches swaying as if they were alive. I pressed on, fear driving me forward, but it took all my strength. Each breath felt labored, heavy with dread. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears as the whispers continued, each word pulling me deeper into despair. You can't escape us, they echoed, sending shivers down my spine. Suddenly, I stumbled, hitting the ground hard. The girl rushed to help me up, concern etched on her face. Are you okay? I nodded, but inside, I felt the shadows drawing closer, circling us like a pack of hungry wolves. We need to find shelter. Somewhere safe, I suggested, urgency spilling from my lips. We started moving again, but it felt like the forest was shifting, twisting around us. Suddenly, we came upon an old cabin, almost hidden amongst the trees. The wooden door hung ajar, creaking softly in the night breeze. It looked ancient and forgotten, but in that moment, it felt like our only hope. Should we go in? The girl asked, doubt clouding her voice. It's better than staying out here, I said, glancing back at the shadows creeping closer. We have to check it out. We entered the cabin cautiously, the air inside thick with an eerie silence. Dust covered every surface, and the smell of decay filled my nostrils. Old furniture lay scattered about, and rotting beams overhead creaked ominously, like the sighs of the long-gone residents. I could feel the chill settling deeper into my bones as I stepped in. Do you think anyone lives here? She murmured, glancing around nervously. No, but this place feels wrong. Like it has seen things, I replied, trying to keep my fear at bay. The shadows outside seemed to swirl as though sensing our presence, waiting for the moment to pounce. In the dim light, I spotted a small fireplace lined with blackened stone. Old ashes lay in a pile, and I found 3 dusty chairs huddled together nearby, as if frozen in a moment of time. I stepped closer, running my fingers along the rough surfaces. Then I turned to the girl. Let's find something to block the door. She nodded and began searching the room while I made my way to the window. Looking out, I felt an unsettling presence. The darkness moved, shifting like mist, wrapping around the trees. I could see eyes glimmering, watching intently, the shadows weaving in and out of sight. A sudden crash echoed from the back of the cabin, startling me. I whipped around, adrenaline surging. What was that? I gasped. I don't know, the girl replied, her voice trembling. Let's find something, I urged, and with that, we hurried toward the back room. As we entered the cramped space, old shutters rattled on their hinges, and the walls felt like they were closing in. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and a musty smell hit me hard. I felt the darkness closing in around us, and the whispers grew frantic, clawing at the edges of my mind. You shouldn't have come here, you can't stay. Ignoring the panic rising in my chest, I scanned the room for something we could use. My heart raced as I spotted an old trunk in the corner, half hidden under a tattered blanket. There. I pointed, and we rushed over to inspect it. With shaky hands, I pulled open the trunk, its hinges creaking like the groans of long-lost ghosts. Inside, a collection of forgotten items lay scattered, worn-out clothes, a rusted lantern, and some odd trinkets that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. My eyes caught a glimmer at the bottom. I reached in, pulling out a strange amulet, heavy and cold in my palm. It felt powerful but dark, pulsing with an energy that sent chills through me. What is this? I wondered aloud, turning the piece over in my hand. I don't know, she said, frowning at it, but maybe it can help us. The whispers grew louder, as if angry at the discovery. Give it back, they hissed, sending paranoia rushing through me. I could feel the darkness seeping into the corners of my mind, trying to twist my thoughts. Let's keep it, I said firmly, shoving the amulet into my pocket. We'll need all the help we can get. Just then, a loud banging echoed from the front of the cabin, startling us both. They're coming, I exclaimed, adrenaline flooding my veins. I looked around, searching for something to block the door. Help me with something. Together, we scrambled to push a rusty old table against the door, but it felt like a futile effort. The banging continued, relentless, and the shadows grappled at the edges of the window, creeping in through the cracks. The girl glanced through a cracked pane, her eyes widening in terror. They're all around us. I stepped back, panic swirling inside me. What are we going to do? But before she could answer, the door burst open with a shriek, revealing a swarm of darkness rolling into the room like a living, breathing entity. They twisted and turned, whispering curses and taunts, their forms constantly shifting. They were no longer just figments of my imagination. They were angry specters who wanted vengeance. Grab the amulet, I shouted, my mind racing to find a way out. I could feel the chill of their presence crawling over my skin, pushing me back against the wall. With shaking hands, she fumbled for the amulet in my pocket. I could see the dark figures closing in, their forms shifting, filled with rage and sorrow. Do something, I urged, my heart thumping loudly in my chest. Finally, she broke the amulet free and held it high, its cold surface catching the dim light. What do I do? She cried, eyes darting around as the shadows closed in. Hold it. Focus on driving them away. I yelled, fear surging through me. She took a breath, and I watched as she summoned every ounce of courage. I won't let you take us, she shouted, voice trembling yet powerful. The shadows flickered, halting momentarily as if surprised. I could see the anger in their eyes, swirling with desperation. You are tied to us, they screamed, vibrations rattling the very foundation of the cabin. The girl held the amulet tighter, energy sparking along its surface. Go back to where you belong. Suddenly, a bright light exploded from the amulet, flooding the room with warmth and power. I shielded my eyes as the shadows recoiled, hissing in pain. The amulet seemed to pull everything together, drawing the darkness toward it. Come on, I shouted, feeling a surge of hope. The shadows fell back, flailing against the light as it pushed them away. We stepped forward, driven by the energy radiating from the amulet. The light engulfed the room, illuminating everything within sight. I saw the twisted faces of the shadows, their mouths opening wide in screams of despair as they dissolved into nothingness. But just then, I heard a primal howl from the depths of the wood, their rage transforming into a vengeful promise. You can't escape us. You'll pay for this. The air grew heavier, and I felt the girl's grip tighten around my arm. We turned to each other, the power of the light surrounding us. It felt like a shield against the darkness, but I knew it couldn't last forever. With the shadows retreating for now, I could sense the urgency lingering in the air. We have to leave now, I urged, and without hesitation, we pushed our way toward the door, the light from the amulet guiding our path through the swirling remnants of darkness. As we stepped back into the night, the world outside felt different, charged with energy and the lingering threat of what had just transpired. The woods seemed to hold their breath, and a distant howl echoed in the distance, a reminder that the darkness was still searching for us. We need to keep moving, I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. We can't let them find us again. Together, we dashed into the depths of the forest, the amulet clutched tightly in her hand, and the weight of the shadows still heavy in our hearts. The night was far from over, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a terrifying journey ahead. With urgency fueling our escape, I sprinted through the dense underbrush, the girl right behind me. The ground was uneven, roots and rocks threatening to trip us at every turn. I could hear the forest alive around us, branches cracking like bones snapping, and the whispers from the shadows lingering, still taunting. Keep moving. I called over my shoulder, pushing myself to run faster. My lungs burned, each breath feeling heavy with the weight of dread. The cool night air did nothing to ease the heat rising from my body. I focused on the amulet in the girl's clenched fist, the faint glow illuminating our way, like a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. Yet, just as I thought we might be safe, a heavy fog began creeping in, rolling across the ground like a sinister tide. It swirled around our feet, thickening the air and wrapping us in an unsettling embrace. I felt an overwhelming sense of despair wash over me, dragging at my thoughts, pulling me toward that suffocating hopelessness I so desperately wanted to escape. Where are we going? The girl asked breathlessly, glancing around as the fog clouded our surroundings. Each tree around us seemed to twist and contort, taking on shapes that chilled my bones. I don't know. Anywhere but here. I gasped, fear clawing at my throat. The shadows had begun to seep into the fog, their forms twisting and merging into the mist, making it hard to discern where they started and the fog ended. The girl stumbled slightly, her foot catching on a root. I reached out, catching her arm just in time. We can't stop now. No matter what, I urged, pulling her close. As we pushed forward, we heard a low growl, deep and rumbling, resonating through the fog. It sent ice coursing through my veins. Did you hear that? I hissed, glancing back. The girl nodded but didn't say anything. We continued, but the growls grew closer, echoing off the trees, mixing with the shadows that danced just out of reach. They felt like hungry eyes watching us, waiting for that moment of weakness when we might falter. Suddenly, the girl tugged on my arm, her face pale as she pointed ahead. "There's something out there," she whispered, her voice trembling. I squinted through the fog, straining to see. At first, it looked like just another tree, but as I focused, I noticed a shape sticking out, like a skeletal figure standing silently among the trunks. It looked almost human, yet twisted and warped, its limbs unnaturally long and contorted until they resembled rough branches more than arms. An uncomfortable shiver ran down my spine. "Maybe it's just our eyes playing tricks on us," I stammered, but deep down I felt that familiar chill of fear. Just then, the figure lurched toward us, its movements jerky and disjointed. A ghastly face emerged from the shadows, a mouth stretched wide in a distorted grin, teeth sharp as daggers. I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, entranced by the horrifying sight. "Run!" the girl screamed, snapping me back to reality. Instinct kicked in, and I pulled her along, heart racing as we dashed further into the fog. The air grew heavier as the growls turned into howls, echoing behind us, pressing us to run harder. It felt like something was gaining ground, just a breath away, chasing us through the thickening darkness. "Over there." I pointed at an old stone wall, partially covered by vines and fog. "Maybe we can hide behind it." Without hesitation, we sprinted toward it, ducking behind the moss-covered stones, pressing our backs against the cold, uneven surface. The wall felt oddly comforting, a strange barrier against the horrors lurking beyond. We held our breath, listening as the howls reached a deafening crescendo, the shadows swirling just outside our hiding place. My heart raced as I tried to calm my breathing. Minutes passed, or at least it felt like hours, and finally, the howls faded into a haunting silence. I exchanged a glance with the girl, our eyes wide with terror. "Do you think it's gone?" I whispered, barely able to manage the words. Before she could answer, a chilling wind blew over us, snaking through the cracks in the wall. It carried with it that same haunting whisper. "Join us, forever." I wanted desperately to cover my ears, to block out the sound that was clawing at the edges of my sanity, but I couldn't. "We need to move," I said, my voice shaking, "before they come back." We pushed away from the wall and crept along the stone, keeping low, the fog wrapping around us like a shroud. As we turned the corner of the wall, I felt an unshakable sense of unease. The air had changed, and the silence felt too thick, as if the woods were holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to unfold. I spotted a path ahead, barely visible beneath the underbrush. "Over there," I said, keeping my voice low. "Let's go." As we stepped cautiously onto the path, I could hear something else now, a soft, steady sound that cut through the silence. It was almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat. My heart raced, erratic and wild, as we followed the sound deeper into the woods. Before long, the fog began to lift slightly, revealing an open clearing. In the center stood a massive, twisted tree, its branches gnarled and clawing at the sky. The sight sent a chill down my spine. The heartbeat grew louder, pulsing from the heart of that tree, syncing with my own. "What is that?" the girl breathed, eyes wide with wonder and fear. "I don't know, but we should stay away," I replied, unease creeping into my voice. But I couldn't look away. Something about that tree pulled at me, as if it were alive in a way that was unfathomable. Suddenly, a faint light flickered around its trunk, illuminating strange symbols carved into the bark. I felt a tugging sensation in my chest, a deep curiosity battling with the fear clawing at me. As I moved closer, the symbols shimmered, and I could hear faint whispers, rising and falling like a song. They promised safety and power, a way to escape this wretched darkness. "Just touch it," they beckoned, their voices smooth and inviting. I felt the girl's hand on my arm, pulling me back. "Don't listen," she warned, her eyes filled with concern. "It's a trap, I can feel it." But the pull was strong. Part of me wanted to reach out, to touch that pulsating energy. I hesitated, caught in a battle between desire and dread, knowing that the darker whispers were still lurking, watching, waiting for me to make the wrong move. And then everything changed. The fog rolled back in, thick and suffocating, the heartbeat turned erratic, speeding up and becoming frantic. The shadows roared back, flooding the clearing like a dark wave, their forms twisting in every direction, eyes glowing with malice. "We will not let you escape," they screamed, their voices a cacophony of rage. The girl grabbed my arm again, fear flooding her face. "We need to run now." I stumbled back, torn between the tree that beckoned to me and the encroaching darkness. I felt a surge of desperation and fear propel me forward. "Run!" I yelled, and together we raced away from the tree, the shadows clawing at our heels with ravenous fury. The clearing blurred behind us, swallowed by the mist, but the echoes of the heartbeat and whispers lingered in my mind. In that moment, I realized that whatever was happening was far from over. The shadows were closing in fast, hungry for our fear, and I could feel their wrath, palpable and fierce. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up," I shouted, breathless, as we veered off the path. The ground beneath us shifted, each step feeling more uncertain. "We have to find a way to fight back," the girl exclaimed, determination hardening her voice despite the panic in her eyes. I grasped the amulet tightly. "This has to mean something," I declared, forcing the fear out of my voice. We rushed onward, desperate to find solace in the swirling chaos, but the shadows closed in, relentless and unforgiving. Just then, the ground trembled and a loud crack echoed above us. I looked up, fear coursing through me as I saw branches snapping above our heads, a dark shape cascading down toward us. There, in the veil of shadows, a massive figure emerged, larger than anything I had ever seen. It towered over us, grotesquely contorted, with eyes that burned like coals, seething with an ancient hunger. "You think you can run?" it roared, the ground shaking beneath its weight. "Your fate is sealed." I felt a pit of terror threaten to swallow me whole. The girl grabbed my hand, her grip tight as we backed away from the hulking figure. It reached out, limbs stretching longer and longer, fingers curling like claws ready to snatch us. "We can't let it catch us," I yelled, adrenaline surging through me as we turned to flee once more. Just then we heard a voice break through the chaos like a clap of thunder. "Hold the amulet." It was a tone unlike anything I'd heard before, powerful and commanding. I spun around, and the girl raised the glowing amulet high, the light pulsing with energy. "Stop!" she shouted, facing the monstrous shadow. It halted in its tracks, confusion etched on its grotesque visage. The brilliance from the amulet illuminated the chaos, cutting through the threatening darkness like a sword of light. "Feel the power of your fears," the voice boomed, and with that, the ground shook once more as the shadows writhed, trying to escape the purity of the light. The colossal figure glared at us, seething with rage, but it seemed tethered as the light spread. I felt a rush of hope bloom within me. "Together," I cried out, and we moved in sync, the girl building her resolve, channeling every ounce of energy into the amulet. The shadows around us recoiled, crumbling under the weight of light pouring forth. "No, this isn't how it ends," the monstrous entity lashed out, its voice a cacophony of fury as the light pushed them away. I could see the shadows tearing apart, their forms dissipating in a whirlwind of darkness, their whispers turning into wails of despair. "This isn't over. We'll always haunt you." But I refused to yield to their threats. With a deep breath, I focused on the light, felt its warmth wrap around me, giving me strength. The light surged forward, consuming the darkness one last time, pushing it back beyond the tree, beyond the reaches of our minds. As the last remnants faded, silence returned. The woods felt transformed. The overwhelming dread that had gripped them was gone. All that remained was the gentle rustling of leaves, fresh air filling my lungs. I turned to the girl, a sense of victory enveloping us. "We did it," I said, awe flooding me as disbelief wrapped around my mind. But even in that moment of triumph, I could sense a lingering shadow. The whispers had quieted, but deep down I felt that they hadn't disappeared completely. With the darkness ebbed but still present, I knew this journey was far from over. "Let's keep moving," I suggested, my voice steady. "We need to find a way to make sure they never come back." Holding the amulet tightly, we forged ahead, ready to face whatever lay ahead, the echoes of the past still haunting our steps. In the stillness of the woods, we ventured forth, fingers intertwined, united against the creeping darkness that would always follow us, waiting for a moment of weakness. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself after the whirlwind of terror we had just faced. The forest was eerily quiet now, as if holding its breath along with us. Every little sound felt amplified. The crunch of leaves underfoot seemed too loud, the flutter of wings above too sharp. I glanced at the girl beside me, her face still pale but determination sparking in her eyes. "Which way?" she whispered, scanning the dark trees that surrounded us. I didn't know. It felt like the forest had shifted around us, the very essence of it changing when we confronted the darkness. The path we were on now seemed unfamiliar, branches reaching out like skeletal fingers trying to ensnare us. A chill slithered up my spine as I thought about what we had escaped, but also what might still lurk in the shadows. "We need to stay alert," I said, forcing my voice to sound confident. "Let's keep moving. We can't stay here." As we ventured deeper into the woods, the air grew thick with an unsettling tension. The trees closed in around us, blocking out the stars until all that was left was an oppressive darkness. I could almost feel it wrapping around us, pulling tighter with every step. The amulet in the girl's hand pulsed softly, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. Then I heard it, a faint sound drifting through the trees, barely audible. It was a low, creaking noise like wood groaning under a heavy weight. I looked at the girl, alarm flashing across her face. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded slowly, every instinct telling me to turn back. The sound escalated into a series of sharp snaps, as if something large was moving through the underbrush. A sense of urgency propelled us forward, but the longer we walked, the louder the noise became, eerie and unrelenting. Suddenly, the ground beneath us shifted, a deep rumble echoing through the earth. I stumbled, nearly falling as a crack opened up just ahead. "What's happening?" the girl cried, her eyes wide with fear. I reached out, gripping her arm tightly, my heart racing. Before I could respond, the ground began to quake violently, sending vibrations up my legs. From the crack, tendrils of darkness oozed, writhing like snakes reaching for the sky. I felt that familiar sense of dread return, gripping my throat. "We need to go. Now," I yelled. We turned to run, but as we did, the shadows broke free of the fissure, slithering across the ground toward us. They twisted and morphed, taking on shapes that looked almost human, faces contorted in rage and sorrow. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, and I fought the urge to gag. Panic surged through me as the shadows closed in. I pulled the girl along, dodging the creeping tendrils that lashed out, trying to ensnare us. "Stay close," I shouted, desperation clawing at me. We burst through the thick brush, stumbling into another clearing, but the sense of safety was fleeting. In the center of this new space stood an old well, crumbling stones dotted with moss and vines. The darkness swirled around it, the shadows swirling like a maelstrom, drawing closer with every heartbeat. "What do we do?" the girl cried, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I shouted back, desperation in my tone. I glanced at the well, feeling an inexplicable pull toward it. Something deep inside whispered that we could find answers there, or perhaps even a way to escape the darkness. As I stepped closer, the whispers from the well began to rise, soft at first but growing louder, more insistent. "Help us! Free us!" they pleaded, but I couldn't tell if they belonged to the shadows or something else entirely. The girl grabbed my arm, her grip like iron. "Don't listen to it. It's a trick." Despite her warning, I felt drawn to the well's edge, peering down into the inky darkness. It seemed endless, the bottom disappearing into shadows that absorbed all. "What?" A flicker of movement caught my eye, a glimmer like something shiny glinting in the depths. I hesitated, uncertainty flooding me. Before I could finish, a powerful force erupted from the well. Dark tendrils shot upward, latching onto my wrists, pulling me forward. I yanked my arm back, but the darkness continued to coil around me, tightening like a noose. "Help!" I gasped, panic choking my voice. The girl grabbed my other arm, pulling with all her might. "I won't let you go," she shouted. Together, we fought against the shadows, her determination mingling with my terror. The more we struggled, the tighter the tendrils pulled. "We have to use the amulet," I realized, desperation fueling my voice. "Raise it. Now." The girl held the amulet high, the light flickering as it fought against the encroaching darkness. "Be gone!" she screamed, focusing all her energy on the amulet. For a moment, the shadows hesitated, the tendrils loosening just enough for me to gasp my breath. The glow of the amulet brightened, illuminating everything in a warm, golden light. As the light spread, the shadows began to recoil, shrieking in rage. "Keep going. You can do this," I urged, my heart racing as the light grew brighter, wrapping around us like a shield. With all our strength, we pushed against the darkness, feeling its hold weakening. The pull from the well grew less intense, almost desperate as its shadowy forms thrashed in agony. When the light reached its peak, it burst forth in a wave that shattered the shadows, sending them screaming back into the depths. In that moment, I felt something snap within me like a dam breaking. All the fear, the doubt, the memories of the darkness swirled together in a chaotic storm. I dared to hope, to believe that we could escape this nightmare once and for all. But as the light began to fade, I heard them again, the whispers rising from the well, more desperate and seducing than before. "Join us, You can't escape. I stumbled back, my heart thundering in my chest. They reached out with promises of power, of escaping reality. It felt almost comforting in a way, a warm embrace against the cold reality of our world. No, I shouted, shaking my head violently. We won't listen. The amulet flickered weakly, the shadows still clawing at the edges of my mind. The darkness began to regain its shape, coiling around us once more. I was terrified we hadn't won yet, that victory was just an illusion. Just then, the ground shifted beneath me again, causing me to stumble toward the well. I grasped for the edges, desperate to hold on. The shadows started to merge, moving together into a solid form, taking shape in front of us. The figure materialized, towering over us, glowing eyes fixated on me. It was the monstrous entity we had seen before, but now it appeared more solid, more real. You will never be free, it growled, its voice like thunder reverberating through my bones. I turned to the girl, panic rising in my chest. What do we do? But she stood frozen, eyes locked on the creature, trembling. I could feel the darkness closing in again, the whispers growing louder, clamoring for control of my mind. Take the amulet, I shouted, barely able to remain coherent amidst the chaos. With a jolt, she held it out before us, and as she did, the light grew once more. Back. You'll regret this, the monster roared, stepping forward, its shadowy tendrils reaching for me. Hold it up, I yelled, stepping back as the creature drew closer, its form pouring with rage. The girl's determination surged for a moment, but I could see a flicker of doubt creep into her expression. Focus, I urged, desperation spilling through my words. It can't touch us if you believe in the light. The girl nodded, her jaw set with determination. The amulet glowed brighter, pushing back against the encroaching shadows, the light filling the clearing. I could feel the weight of fear lift slightly, though my heart still raced in anticipation of the fight ahead. The monster screeched again, lunging toward us just as a brilliant burst shot from the amulet, the light blinding and pure. I shielded my eyes as the shadows collapsed around us. Then everything went silent. In that quiet moment, I felt the power of the amulet wane but somehow linger, a gentle reminder of our struggle. I opened my eyes, seeing the monster's form reduced to wisps of shadow, retreating back toward the well. Did we do it? The girl whispered. I think we have to keep moving, I replied, scanning the clearing cautiously. The well still exuded an eerie presence, and the whispers had grown silent, though I knew it wouldn't last. With the shadows retreating, I felt a flicker of hope sparking within me. Let's leave this place before they come back, I urged, nudging her gently, feeling the grip of tension slowly loosen. We turned away, leaving the remnants of the darkness behind as we stepped back onto the path, the night still awake around us. But even as we walked, I felt a lingering fear in my gut. Deep down, I knew that we had yet to unveil the truth behind the whispers, the secrets wrapped in the boundaries of the woods. The shadows may have been pushed back this time, but they would always be waiting, lurking just out of sight, eager for a chance to reconnect. As we journeyed on, every rustle in the leaves and crack of a branch made me jump. I stole a glance at the girl, her face determined but marked by shadows of fear. I sought to reassure her, but I knew the truth. We had escaped one nightmare, but a deeper darkness still lingered, threatening to overpower us again. The path ahead twisted into the unknown, and as the trees loomed overhead, I understood that confronting the darkness would demand everything from us. Whatever was at stake, I was determined to face it head-on. Together we pressed on, hearts racing, ready to unveil the darkness still lurking in these cursed woods. Little did we know, the real horror was still waiting just around the corner, eager to make its move. As we pressed onward, the atmosphere thickened like fog wrapping around us. The shadows between the trees seemed to slither, shifting with a life of their own. I could feel the weight of something watching, lurking just beyond the edges of my vision. The girl walked beside me, her footsteps light but cautious. Do you think they'll come back? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, I replied, trying to sound brave as we navigated the narrow path. But we have to stay vigilant. I could see her glancing around, her eyes darting to every rustle in the underbrush. It felt like the trees themselves were listening, their gnarled branches bending slightly in the wind, almost like they were trying to whisper secrets we weren't meant to hear. A strange sound broke through the silence, a low humming, almost like a distant lullaby. It floated through the air, wrapping around us like a vine. I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding louder than the melody. Do you hear that? I asked, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. Her expression was tense. I do, but what is it? The humming seemed to grow louder, pulling me in, a siren's call beckoning me closer. Against my better judgment, I took a step forward, feeling an unstoppable urge to follow it. I think we should check it out, I murmured, an inexplicable curiosity weaving through my fear. Before she could protest, I started walking deeper into the woods, drawn by the mysterious sound. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the very ground was trying to hold me back. The air became thick and heavy, and shadows began to stretch and twist around me, their forms taking shape in the flickering light of the amulet. "Wait, please," the girl pleaded, grabbing my arm just as I reached a small clearing. The sounds were near now, echoing around me. I turned to look back at her, my heart racing as I realized we were far from where we had started. The trees loomed behind us, thick and dark, creating a wall that felt impossibly close. In the center of the clearing, I saw a circle of stones, each one strangely polished and glinting under the dim light from the amulet. The humming rose and fell like a heartbeat, pulsating with an energy that was almost tangible. I felt the pull toward it, something deep inside urging me to step closer. "Don't," she warned, her voice trembling. "This doesn't feel right." Ignoring her caution, I moved forward, unable to resist the fascination in the center of the circle. The humming intensified, vibrating through my bones. Just as I reached out to touch one of the stones, a flash of movement caught my eye and I jerked back. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing, shrouded in shadow. It was tall and slender, with limbs that elongated into the darkness. I squinted, trying to make sense of it, my mind scrambling to comprehend what was in front of me. Its face was obscured, a void of blackness that absorbed any light. "Come closer," the figure beckoned, its voice a soft whisper that cut through the air, smooth and slippery like oil. "Don't," I shouted, my instincts screaming for me to run. But my feet felt rooted to the ground, fear paralyzing me. I could see the girl trembling beside me, her hands curled into fists at her sides. "What do you want?" she asked, courage slipping through her fear. "I want what you desire most," the figure replied, its voice melodic and enticing. "A chance to rid yourself of the darkness. To find power. To rule over it." I shook my head, trying to push away the alluring promises that floated through the air. "We don't want anything from you." "Are you sure?" it purred, a deep laugh rumbling from its core. "You will face darkness again. That power you wield is simply a flicker in the shadows. But I can make you stronger. I can help you defeat it." Sweat trickled down my back, my heart racing as the figure took a step closer. The shadows around it pulsed, undulating like living flesh. I felt a surge of fear wash over me and I stumbled back, crashing into the girl who was still rooted to the spot. "What are we going to do?" I whispered, panic gripping me. She didn't answer, her eyes locked on the figure as it moved closer, buoyed by the hum that surrounded us. "You must choose," it said, its voice weaving into our minds like a web. "Together you can wield great power. Or walk away, letting the darkness consume you both." "Stop it," I screamed, shoving away the creeping thoughts that threatened to seduce me. "We're not interested." With that, I turned to flee, grabbing the girl's hand as we bolted from the clearing. The shadows screamed in anger, the humming morphing into a cacophony of rage behind us. We sprinted through the trees, branches clawing at our faces as we ran deeper into the woods, desperate to escape the figure's grasp. But the further we moved, the more disoriented we became. The trees looked the same, every path winding back into the darkness. I could hear it now, the weight of unholy whispers creeping back into my ears, promising me everything I had ever desired. "Keep moving," I urged, pulling her along. "We can't stop." As the screams and humming crescendoed behind us, I felt fear blossoming into rage. It wasn't just the darkness trying to trap us, it was a reminder of everything we had endured. We had faced it before, we could do it again. Suddenly, a chill swept through the air. I skidded to a halt, shivering as tendrils of darkness wrapped around my legs, pulling me down. "No, not again." The girl grabbed my arm, trying to pull me up, but my foot was caught, the shadows pulling tighter. "I can't," I gasped, panic spiraling within me. "Let go of her," she shouted, her eyes fierce. In that moment, something snapped within me, a determination igniting like wildfire. I closed my eyes, pushing the fear aside. "I won't be afraid. I won't let you take me." With every ounce of strength, I reached for the amulet, feeling its warmth against my skin. I directed my energy toward it, the light flaring brightly. The shadows recoiled, releasing their grip just long enough for me to break free. "Now," I shouted, and together we raised the amulet. A blinding beam of light erupted from the stone, cutting through the darkness like a knife, illuminating everything around us. The shadows shrieked in agony, their forms writhing as they were forced back. But the figure was still there, its silhouette darkening the edges of the light, attempting to resist. "You think this will save you?" it taunted, a twisted grin forming on its shadowy face. Our resolve hardened, the light flaring brighter. "We'll find a way to defeat you," I cried out, feeling the power surge through me, an echo of the strength I had so desperately sought. The shadows thrashed wildly, disappearing into the dim corners of the clearing. I could hear their echoes, desperate and furious, but still we pushed forward. As the light engulfed everything, I saw it, an opening in the darkness, a way forward. "Let's go," I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos. We raced toward the light, the path ahead brightening as it pulled us in. Just before we crossed the threshold, I caught a last glimpse of the figure, its dark form twisting and contorting, eyes blazing with fury. "This isn't over," it screamed, its voice fading into a haunting echo. Then we were through, the world shifting around us as we emerged into a new space, bright and filled with mist. I looked back, half expecting to see the ominous figure following. But all that remained was the lingering sense of dread, and the echoes of the shadows that had haunted us still fresh in my mind. Yet even in the safety of this new realm, I knew the fight wasn't over. The darkness was more than an entity, it was a war that waged within, and I could still feel its presence, waiting, lurking just beneath the surface. As I took a deep breath, the girl beside me still clutching the amulet, I realized this was only a small victory. Something deeper, something more sinister awaited us, and with each step, we needed to be ready for the shadows to strike back. And so we moved forward into the mist, hearts racing, prepared to face whatever lay beyond the horizon. The echoes of the dark would always whisper, but I vowed to keep fighting, to embrace the light within and confront the battles that were yet to come. The mist swirled around us as we walked, wrapping us in a cold embrace. I glanced at the girl, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. "What now?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I could see her resolve beginning to waver, and I felt an urgency to reassure her. "I don't know," I admitted, my heart pounding in my chest. "But we can't stop. We have to keep moving." The air felt thick with an electric tension, and each breath I took was laden with a sense of impending doom. Shadows danced just beyond the mist, shifting and twisting like they were alive, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As we ventured deeper, the atmosphere grew heavier. The mist thickened, turning darker, and soon, it felt more like a veil of dread than anything else. I could hear whispers again, soft and sinister, slithering through the air and wrapping around my mind. "Come back to us," they seemed to sing, dripping with malice. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. Her eyes widened, staring straight ahead, an undeniable fear creeping into her gaze. "I did. It's close. We have to go." It felt like we were moving toward a dark heart of the woods, the mist swirling like a storm, and I could almost sense something lurking, watching us from the shadows. Just as we took another step, the ground beneath our feet rumbled, sending shivers through my spine. The trees cracked and groaned, shifting as though they were alive. Suddenly, the whispers morphed into laughter, a piercing sound that echoed around us, chilling my blood. "You can't escape," they taunted, a chorus of disembodied voices that filled my every thought, suffocating in their intensity. I felt a chill race up my spine as the laughter continued to swirl around us. "They're coming," I shouted, trying to shake the fear that gripped me. "We have to find shelter." We dashed forward, pushing through the thick mist that felt like a dark curtain. The shadows coiled around our legs, tugging at us like 1,000 hands trying to hold us back. I fought against them, adrenaline surging as panic clawed at my throat. "Just keep moving," I yelled again, the girl close behind, her breath shaky as she struggled to keep up. But the laughter grew louder, resonating within me, blending with my own fear. Suddenly, the mist split open, revealing a path. It flashed with a dim light, a quick promise of safety just ahead. Without thinking, we darted toward it, hoping to find a way out of this nightmare. As we stepped onto the path, I felt an immediate sense of relief wash over me until I turned to see what had followed. My heart sank. The shadows had twisted, taking on more tangible forms. Figures emerged from the mist, their features warped and grotesque, taunting smiles stretching impossibly wide across their faces. Eyes glowed with a hunger that filled me with dread. "Join us," they hissed in unison, stretching their arms out like long, clawed hands reaching for us. "You are part of the darkness now." I grabbed the girl's wrist, pulling her back. No, we won't. Their laughter erupted, echoing wildly through the woods. I could feel their presence closing in, suffocating the path we stood on, chaining us to our fears. Fight it, I urged, squeezing her hand tightly. We turned, heart pounding, racing deeper down the path, leaving the echoing cries behind us. But the figures twisted in the mist, their laughter painting the air with madness. I could hear whispers again, now mixed with cries of despair and anger, fueling my fear as I ran faster. Then I spotted a faint light flickering in the distance, bright against the horizon of shadows. Look, I shouted, hope surging within me. That way. The light pulsed gently, illuminating the path as we sprinted towards it. But the shadows weren't far behind, closing the distance between us with every step. The path twisted and turned, branches clawing at our clothes, pulling us back, trying to trap us. I could feel their grip getting tighter, wrapping around my legs, pulling me down into the abyss. Keep going, I yelled, urgency fueling my voice. The girl hesitated for a fraction of a second, and I felt her grip loosen as she stumbled. I turned quickly, panic surging through me. No, don't stop. She grimaced, a flash of fear crossing her face. I can't, Don't give in. I shouted, desperation taking hold. I reached for her, urgency pushing me forward. We're almost there. The ground shook violently. I tightened my grip, ready to pull her with me. Come on. We have to fight them together. The shadows surged closer, and I could see their twisted forms forming a wall of darkness ready to swallow us whole. I braced myself, taking a step back and pulling her with me. The light before us brightened, growing warmer as we shifted toward it, a beacon amidst the icy grasp of the shadows. I could hear the whispers rising to a peak of rage, filled with fury and loss, and I knew we had to face the darkness within us, to wield the light to cut through the chaos. With a final surge of strength, we dashed towards the light, the figures shrieking, reaching out with clawed hands. I felt their cold breath on my skin, a chill that sent shivers down my spine, but I kept going. As we burst into the bright light, everything shifted again. I felt warmth enveloping us, pushing the shadows back, and the laughter turned into cries of anguish. We had crossed the threshold, escaping their grasp for now. But the moment was fleeting. In that place of light, I felt the shadows lingering at the edges, whispering that this was not an escape but a temporary respite. You'll be back, they echoed, their voices laced with malice. I turned to the girl, both of us breathing heavily. What just happened? I don't know, she replied, her face pale but fierce. But we have to stay strong. We knew then deep inside that the battle was not over, not by a long shot. The darkness would always be waiting, slinking in the shadows, ready to strike when we least expected it. It wasn't just an external force. It thrived on our fears and insecurities, feeding on them as it encroached around us. Together, we faced the horizon ahead, determined to meet whatever came next. With a glowing amulet in hand and an unbreakable bond forged through fear, we realized we were the light that would always fight back against the encroaching dark. The battle would carry on, each step a new challenge, but as long as we stood together, I believed we could face whatever lay beyond. Because once you've stared into the abyss and fought your way back, you learn to embrace the light you carry within, even amidst the darkest of shadows. And so, I took a deep breath, ready for whatever came next, my heart beating strong with the knowledge that I would never have to face this nightmare alone again.